manager is a similar functionality like Heidi or Workbench on a limited sense. It's not very highly, but it takes care of the most of the things which are required for a typical, database front end. So it supports like for MySQL, Postgres, and other databases in read mode. It allows to fetch data, manipulate database objects like tables, views, functions, stored procedures, triggers, and so on. Okay, so here like there are various objects. So here it's actually showing all tables used in that particular database, and then execute query actually executes a particular gets the data from a particular table. So here current table is selected, and it shows all the fields in that table. It shows what are the data types. Like here it shows it's integer, it's a primary key, and it's also used as a unique key. This actually shows the outcome of the previous this one. Okay, and then WK Studio has a quick chart. So for example, there are here there is a symbols. The data can be sorted, or data, some rows can be removed, or some columns can be removed based on the requirement, and so on. So this is just a quick graph to see the data, this one. And again, the UI can be changed. For example, it can be changed from bar graph to pie chart, and so on, depending on the requirement. And again, there are large number of parameters which can change at a runtime. So this is like a, a, a plot interface which allows you to connect various parameters at runtime. It can be a grid, it can be legends, it can be a color, it can be axis title, y axis title, size of the graph, and so on. And again, this is a graph can be downloaded or it can be expanded depending on the functionality required, and so on. Again, as I told earlier, it actually allows you to manipulate multiple types of objects. You can see table views, functions, SPs, triggers, and there can be objects which are actually specific to particular application. So suppose you are dealing with inventory application, so it actually shows all the tables, views which are related to that particular application, and so on. So it actually helps to manage the database objects application wise. Okay, so when views is selected, it actually shows all the views on the left hand side, and one can actually go more drill down. So similarly, like within the views, it can show what are the fields in that particular view. And there is an option here, show selected queries. Sorry, selected views. It actually shows complete view on the editor window, which can be modified based on the requirement. This is a trigger. You see all the triggers are displayed here, and this is a trigger code which is displayed, and it can be updated based on the requirement, and so on. Okay, these are typical functions which are executed in a database. Like views can be created, they can be dropped, they can be selected. For example, here again, you can drop the table, you can drop the function. So depending on the requirement, the lot of functionality can be executed as a part of database interface. Then field schema interface, which allows you to add a field or update the existing one, like a typical database front end. So here you see that current field is employee ID. Its data type is integer. Okay, then size is not required. No, if it is a text data type, then size may be required. Okay, and then is non-null, is auto increment. So these options are available. So here you can rename the existing field, you can remove it, or you can uh, uh, add a new field based on the requirement, and so on. So here just add a new field, it can be added, and so on. Similarly, a table can be manipulated. So here it shows like you can add a table, you can define various integrity controls like primary key, unique key, foreign key, or index, and it actually displays the existing one. So here it shows like employee ID is used as a primary key. So everything is which is required to create a database, tables, fields is part of WK Studio interfaces, and with a lot of predefined functionality also based on the requirement. So this is one stored procedure loaded at runtime. This is a screenshot of that. This one. Now here again, scripts can be, there can be a scripts which can be written like, you can store the set of scripts and then load them at runtime based on the requirement and so on. Okay, this interface talks about mapping between WK Studio variables and database tables and fields. So on the right hand side, if you see, this is a mapping. For example, item amount is mapped to uh, amount, and this is table name is left blank because it can actually take the data from any source, but it can be actually connected to a particular table in update mode and so on. Again, for each there are again various functions which are allowed. Then whether so here it shows that amount is linked to a field amount of a table. This is a view basic. So this again mapping is used for multiple purpose to retrieve the data from database, and there are again options like whether there is a transformation required, any functions to be executed at runtime and so on. So here, this is a dynamic query interface, as you say the name. These are basically predefined queries, which can be used at a runtime. So this drop down is showing for what purpose the queries can be created. So here, one of the purposes it can be for data entry, it can be for lookup tables, or it can be for use for clustering, or it can be for CPR search and so on, because it automatically checks the query and its fields based on the functionality required. Again, here you can see whatever filters, whatever fields you want to insert at runtime, everything can be part of it. Then again, what is a retrieve option? Like when the data is retrieved, whether you want to retrieve the data as character set or comma delimited or pipe delimited, or you want to check whether it has a row at runtime, that can be done. So in code, you just say is data found and then write a query. It automatically executes the query and check whether it has a row or not. Okay, and again there can be large number of parameters which can set at a runtime. When the query is executed, you can even add to existing query. You can remove some fields at runtime based on the context or based on the requirement. You can even change the titles of the field and at runtime. Then there are some mandatory variables. That means these variables will be inserted at runtime, which actually safeguards from SQL injection kind of, because these are done through browser, through session. So external users cannot just tweak with that. So these options are possible. This just a quick overview of data import interface, which allows to import the data from CSV, Excel, and other databases. And typically it is stored with a data source name, so which can be used to retrieve the data or update the data later on. So it stores the definition of how the data is actually imported, whether it's imported from CSV file, Excel file, or what kind of file. So this is just a quick run through of how data import interface works. So this is a name of the data source employee 10. It actually creates a corresponding table in the database. And now it is saying it is actually taken from text file. It's a new text file to be imported and so on. Here it's actually asking what is file to be chosen. Okay. So once a file is chosen from client, it actually displays the content of the that data file. This is actually CSV file, and you see there are various parameters. For example, whether the first row is header or header, replace the header spaces with underscore. Okay, and if you want to add some additional field, they can be added at runtime, based on. And again, just like a typical import interface, there are options whether it's a delimited or it's a fixed length or delimited by comma and so on. What is a date format? So everything a typical data import interface needs is a part of this data import interface. Once go to the next, click on go to the next button, it actually gets all the schema from OLEDB text driver. It's actually showing what are the columns in CSV file, and what are the corresponding database fields. So for example, it removes the spaces if there are any spaces, then it automatically selects the data types using OLEDB driver. However, sometimes it can go wrong. So for example, here contact number is actually converted into float, but it needs to be converted into big data. So while importing, one has to be a little bit careful, like data types are properly mapped. Then data size, it's automatically picked from the data, which can be tweaked later on. Default values can be set, and sign, unsign things can be set. Another thing is like you can set a particular field as a primary key or unique key based on the requirement before the data is imported. If there is some error, for example, if there are some keywords or something, this interface throws the error, and those can be corrected and so on. Again, some parameters like only distinct records or make primary auto increment, like miss here employee ID can be made auto incremented, if it is required in some cases and so on. And you can start an auto increment from a particular number based on that. So once you click on next, again it asks you whether you want to create an unique key is not part of that, and whether you want to create or not, it will automatically do it. Now, once you again click on the next, it shows number of records inserted. It says there are 34 records inserted in the this one. That means now what it has done, it has created a database, sorry, data table at the back. It has created a schema and inserted a record into this one. This is a schema file generated for currently generated data source name called employee 10. Okay, and you can see here like service ID is given. This is a unique ID given to that particular service, so it can be invoked inside the code or any other object. So it knows that the data is coming from text file. This is the source data. These are the fields and so on. And you can actually select a particular, fields when you are importing the data from this one. So here it actually shows you can actually import only specific data. You can update the existing data and select whatever fields you want to. Again, you can select what is the buffer size and so on. So it actually selects the proper buffer when it's actually getting the data from CSV file or whatever text file selected. Okay, and this is how if you just refresh as a query builder, you can see the data which is actually created just now. This one. So you can see again using a report interface, you can see the data quickly, see the graphs and everything. So this makes it easier to import the data into uh, any database easily.